Hi everyone, welcome to episode 9 of Not the Worsted Knitting Podcast. My name is Michelle and I am the knitter and knitwear designer behind Mishi Fraz Knits. In today's episode, we will talk a little bit about what I'm wearing. We have one more pattern release update, and then we will talk a little bit about my works in progress. So without further ado, why don't we go ahead and talk about this. This is the Caspar top by Colibri by Johanna. And oh, you can actually see Bagel. Bagel is, I guess, just hanging out. They're a little bit sleepy today because it's a little cloudy outside, so I guess he's just gonna be hanging out there. So anyway, back to my Caspar top. So like I said, this is a tank designed by Colibri by Johanna, and I knit this in size 1. I'll go ahead and get up so you can kind of see how it fits and drapes. I talked a bit about this garment in my most and least worn summer knits, so I won't go too in depth, but I will say that I love this. This is actually one of my favorite summer knits. I knit this in, so the smallest size, and I used the recommended needles, which were US 5, which is a 3.75 millimeter, and a US 8, which is a 5 millimeter needle. Basically, you start out, I have fuzzies already, you start out with the larger needle to achieve this larger gauge up top, and it gives kind of a mesh appearance. And then right around here, you do a series of rapid increases. You do a ton of increases really fast. That's kind of what creates that billowy effect, and it opens up a little bit once you do that. And also once you do that, you switch to the smaller needle size, and so you get a nice tight gauge. I mean, it's not terribly tight, but it's a decent gauge considering this pattern calls for, what does it call for? She recommends Lana Grossa silk hair, which is a mohair, held single. As I talked about in my last video, I can't do mohair for summer. That's just way too hot for me. So what I used instead is Juniper Moon Farm Findley, which is a lace weight yarn, and it is 50% silk, 50% merino, and this is in the color Rappahannock. Now, I was going to talk a little bit more about the yarn, but when I looked it up, I just saw that they discontinued this, which I actually think is kind of a shame. I suspect it's because it's lace weight, so people don't really know what to do with that, but it's a really beautiful yarn, and for this project, I think it's actually really amazing. The 50% silk means the drape is fantastic. It's got a nice shine to it. And then, I mean, I guess there's enough merino in there to like give it a little bit of memory, but really it just drapes really well. So yeah, I don't want to, I guess, talk too much about this because I don't know if you can really find this yarn anymore. But just so you know, if you do use another lace weight yarn like it and you want to do this pattern, I only used 0.75 skeins, so like not even a whole ball of it, which was 590 yards total for this. So if you've ever bought a lace weight yarn, typically you get a ton of yardage just because it's so thin. And so you could probably get away with, if you're knitting one of the smaller sizes, you could probably get away with, you know, maybe just using one ball of yarn, which is amazing. As I mentioned in my previous video, this has an I-cord edging all around the neckline and the arm details, as well as on the bottom hem. Being that this was lace weight, it took a really long time, and I did have to do this twice, but it's super worth it. I think it looks really clean. The edge looks really nice, and it holds its shape really well. I hang this on a hanger in my closet. It's the only knit I will probably ever hang because it's reinforced here on the edges. And then one more detail, which I will flip, let's see how, yeah. It's got this really nice keyhole edge, or keyhole shape in the back. I closed mine up. I think you can actually leave it open to where you have the buttonhole. I was never gonna open and close that, and I worried that over time that buttonhole was gonna get really loose, so I just seamed it together and I put a little pearl button on it, and I really like it, really happy with it. I love this as a warm weather knit. Like, this is, if I want to wear a knit but it's really hot outside, this is what I'm gonna go for, and it's really great. It's loose, it's drapey, but it's still flattering, I think, in a nice way. Like it just, I don't know. I love to just kind of swish around in it and it just kind of goes. So yeah, really happy with this. Really love the color, and there's a UPS truck here now. So we're gonna, are they? I don't know. All right, so we just had a UPS delivery, but we're all good. So we're gonna keep it moving. So yes, love the color, love this top, super happy with it. I would definitely recommend this pattern. Even though it was lace weight yarn, the needle size is pretty big. So I got through it pretty quickly, all things considered. Honestly, the longest part was really just the I-cord edge. And if you've ever picked up and knit an I-cord edge on fingering weight or smaller, then you will understand that that is maybe, I don't want to say it's the worst part. It was my least favorite part, let's just say that. But enjoyed the pattern. I will note, just in case you're interested, I looked it up and it looks like the pattern only comes in 6 sizes. I know it's meant to have 11 to 14 inches of positive ease, and I've noticed that with a lot of patterns that have a large amount of ease, sometimes they do less sizes because they think you can kind of like go in between. So I don't really know if you're looking for exactly this kind of drape. I don't know if all the sizes will accommodate that, but I will say that it goes from a 45-inch finished bust to a 62-inch finished bust. So, you know, there's 6 sizes. Maybe your mileage may vary in between how much ease you end up getting, depending on where you fit within that size range. But yeah, I just wanted to call that out. And also it is $7.94 on Ravelry. So yes, this is what I'm wearing. Even though it's cloudy today, it is still pretty warm. I mean, I'm in the Pacific Northwest, so it's not like crazy hot out. I am lucky in that we're not dealing with any kind of heat waves right now, knock on wood. But it's warm enough to where I could wear this and be comfy. And yeah, so that's what I'm wearing. Okay, in terms of pattern updates for today, there's a couple of things I just want to touch on. First, you'll see my Prismatic Reflections summer top is sitting here on the mannequin today. And I just want to say thank you to everybody. There were so many kind words about this pattern, and you guys seem to be as excited about it as I was, especially with the final colors that I picked, and that was pretty cool. So thank you for that. And I just want to note that I did include the summer modifications in the pattern. So if you've already purchased the pattern before I made those updates, you will have gotten a notification via Ravelry that the pattern has been updated. And then if you've purchased it since then, you'll see that those modifications are already included. So it is a sweater pattern, but then I've got little boxes to indicate sections where you can make a modification. And then I've got a page in the back that has all the yardage estimates, as well as what the different modifications were that I made. So like I said, you know, the modifications were just the collar, the hem, and then the sleeve length. Nothing major, no big changes to the pattern. So that has all been updated in the pattern now. So now you can buy the sweater pattern and also be able to knit the summer version. And I already talked about that a whole bunch last video, so I won't keep going on about it, but I just, again, thank you so much for all your kind words. It's just really great. So my next pattern update that I want to talk about and I'm very excited about are my Siroc Socks. My Siroc Socks are finally out into the world. So as I'm filming this, technically they're not out yet, but by the time this video goes live, this pattern will be released. It will be available on Ravelry and my website. And if you've watched this video at all, then you are already familiar with these socks. If you follow me on Instagram, you are familiar with these socks. Basically, these socks came about because I had leftover Advent self-striping sock yarn. And I had already made myself a pair of vanilla socks with that yarn last holiday. And I had this leftover yarn that I was like, what do I do with it? You know, it's good yarn, I should make socks again. I didn't want to make another pair of vanilla socks with it because that just seemed a little bit boring after I'd already done that. And I thought that it might be fun to give my husband a pair. He loves socks. It's a really nice yarn. it's a pretty hardy yarn, which is good, and it might be fun for us to have a sort of matching pair. So because I was playing with a yarn that was going to create horizontal stripes, I was thinking about a pattern I could do that would play off of the verticality of it. So you'll have these vertical lines, but then maybe something that kind of converges through it. And that's where I came up with this cable pattern. And it's a series of slip stitches that you then cable, and it's very easy. It's a 2-stitch cable repeat, super, super easy. The stitch repeat itself is 8 stitches in total. And it's actually very fun. It knits up very fast because you're slipping so many stitches throughout. You're just knitting and slipping, and then you just have one row every 6 or 8 rows. I can't remember at this point, where you cable. And it's very quick. Like, you knock out a sock in no time, and my testers all agree. So anyway, so I knit this up, and it ended up having some things I wanted to tweak about it. Like I said, this was supposed to be for my husband, but I didn't take into account the fact that cabling kind of cinches in your sock circumference a little bit. If you've ever knit cabled socks, you might notice that either the stitch counts are a little bit different, or it is just a tighter sock than you're used to wearing. And so when my husband went to try this on, it didn't really fit him great. Like, it was very tight. And so I realized it just wasn't gonna work for him. So it ended up being a pair for me because this actually fits me perfectly, which is kind of funny. But so the one thing that I realized about that was that knitting a size for him ended up fitting me perfectly. And if you go off of your normal sock stitch counts, he is the next size up from me. So that made me think about what I was going to need to do in order to get the right gauge for your typical size. And there were a couple other issues I ran into with being that this is an 8-stitch repeat. I thought that would be fine because your sock stitch counts are typically divisible by 8. What I didn't take into account was that each half may not be. And when you break this up between the front half and the back half, what ended up happening was you were getting this one slip stitch that was being pulled into the heel on both sides. And even when I tried to readjust it when I did the heel, and it put so much tension on that stitch that I knew that I couldn't release a pattern like this, because I don't want to have that much pressure being pulled from that one stitch, especially in the heel, because once you put your foot in, that's like the widest part of your foot. And so to add even more tension there, I was just like, that's not going to work. So I knew I needed to rethink the stitch counts and just the general measurements for getting a good fit for each size. So what I started thinking about when I was looking at your typical sizes and doing the math is that for all of my standard sock patterns, I have the standard 4 sizes. And it's kind of the sizes you see in most sock patterns. I'm not going to say all, because there are changes that need to be made for some depending on gauge and pattern and stitch counts. But if you go off of your typical like vanilla sock 4 sizes, 2 out of the 4 stitch counts worked with this stitch pattern to create a clean, seamless look once you added the heel in. Sizes 2 and 4 were the stitch counts that worked out to where when you broke it in half, it still worked. But if I wanted, people with the size 1 foot or a size 3 foot to be able to have socks, I needed to figure out what to do there. And then I was thinking about the fact that, like I said, I knit this for my husband and it ended up fitting me. So then I was thinking about needle size. And so I knit this first pair on a US 1, which is a 2.25 millimeter needle. That's what I typically do for sock patterns if it's just a standard sock. And so what I was thinking about is, what if I bump up to a US 1.5, which is a 2.5 millimeter needle? Will that be a big enough gauge to give me the size I'm looking for my husband's foot? And so that's what I did for my second sock, which is for him. And you'll have to excuse the way it looks. My husband has already worn these a bunch of times, and the dye is starting to wear a little bit. This is kind of common with some of like indie dyed yarns on socks. I don't know if you have this problem too, but just over time in the higher trafficked areas, I guess we'll say, it starts to wear a little bit, and he has thoroughly enjoyed these already. And like I said, I made these like a while ago now. Like these have been done for a while, and I've just been waiting to release them. So for his, I actually went up to the larger stitch count than what he would normally do, and I used the US 1 needle. So I think it would technically be your like extra large stitch count, but on the US 1 needle, what that did was that ended up giving me a large fit with the cabling. So that worked out perfectly. So I knew that if I went up a size to what you would typically do with a US 1 or 2.25 needle, it would get you the fit that you wanted for your size. But what I still needed to test was if that same theory would work with the other sizes. So like for instance, for my size, which I'm typically a size 2 or a medium for socks, which is standard 64 stitches on a US 1 or 2.25 millimeter needle. So for this, what I ended up doing was knitting this with that typical stitch count, but on the US 1.5 or 2.5 millimeter needle. And it ended up fitting me perfectly. So it worked out. Basically, the math worked out to where I have those 2 stitch counts between 4 sizes, and you change your needle size depending on if you want the larger or the smaller fit. It's all explained in the pattern. It sounds way more complex than it is. And in fact, I was really worried about this when it went into testing because, as you know, it is a snugger fit. Now, the way I've done it, it should fit your standard size. So if you're typically a size medium sock, doing a size medium will get you, or a size 2 is medium on this, it will get you the fit that you're expecting. But when I first did this, I really wasn't sure, just because it had only been socks that I had knit for us up to this point, and even though they fit both of us great, you never know how it's gonna be when other people knit up the same pattern. So I gave my testers a whole bunch of warnings when we first started. I was like, just so you know, the gauge is a little tighter than usual. If you are in between on gauge, like if you're not meeting gauge and you're not sure which way to go larger, just because I'm worried these will be too tight. And what ended up happening is anybody who went larger than what I recommended in the pattern had a slightly larger fit. And everybody who just followed the pattern exactly was very happy with the fit. So I took all those warnings off, just kept the gauge as recommended, knit your standard size that you would with these stitch counts and this needle size, and you will get the fit that you want. And then also, because I had all of these weird sizes, I wanted to include one more size than I normally do, just in case people were ending up having a gauge that was pretty tight. There is one larger size at the end than what I typically do. But I think most of my testers did sizes 1 through 4. I did have 1 or 2 testers do the larger size, and that worked out, but they had a larger foot. So all of this to say that if you just go off of your measurements on your foot and follow the pattern, you will get a sock that fits really nicely. I would say that this is a little bit snugger than like a standard vanilla sock, but it's not too tight at all. And in fact, the pattern stretches out quite a bit. It's not a stiff cable pattern at all. Like, yeah, the pattern stretches really well. So the Siroc sock is live, and the other fun thing about this is that you can see what it looks like in a striped version, in a solid or tonal version, and in a speckled or variegated version. And I thought it was really fun to show all of these different options. One, I have really enjoyed knitting these socks. This pattern is really fun. It's quite addicting. It was nice because most of the feedback from the testers was that this was just a joy to knit. I have several testers who have knit multiple pairs and they knit them really fast. Like it just goes really quick. And so I just, with it being such a unique pattern, I was just genuinely curious how it would look in the different yarns, and it works, I think, in lots of different ones. And what I was surprised about is that even though I would say that the speckled one is maybe the one that's harder to see out of the three, if you kind of compare, the majority of my testers actually chose variegated yarns based off of the photos of this one. So I think it just makes a really fun pattern, and even though it's not like super obvious in the speckled yarn, you still see it. You still see the texture and you feel it when you're wearing it on the top. And it's just really nice. Really happy to have this guy out, and really happy to finally be able to wear these guys, because even though I handed this one off to Thomas to wear, I haven't worn mine yet just because I wanted to make sure I got all the photos and that it still looked, you know, in good condition for me to actually share it. But now I can wear them, and I will probably wear them tonight, and I'm very excited about it. So that is the Siroc sock, and yeah, that does it for my patterns, and that'll probably do it for my patterns for a while. I do have a blue sky fibers design that I'm working on. As I've said, I'm in their maker program, so they send me yarn and I come up with a pattern design, and so I am working through one of those right now that will be out this fall, and I'll probably share about it once it's at a stage where I feel like it's fun to chat about. Like right now I'm still very much in like the swatching and early days phase, so showing it right now would be kind of a letdown. But I am working on, I have another work in progress right now based on what I was debating last week, and that is this guy. So this is my Everyday Attitude. This pattern is by Susanne Sommer. It is $7.95 on Ravelry. And yeah, so there are some interesting things that I have dealt with so far on this journey to find my next summer top. As I mentioned, I'm going to reach over and grab my yarn. Ooh. All right. As I mentioned before, I had all of this yarn in stash, and this is Blue Sky Metallico, and it is a 50% alpaca, 50% silk yarn. And it's a great yarn. I mean, look at the drape on that. Like, obviously, alpaca and silk, like, so good. It's a very cool to the touch yarn, and it's also quite shiny. I really enjoyed working with it on my last project, and so I really thought it would be nice to use for a summer top. And I had talked about a few tops that I was considering, and the front runner was Everyday Attitude by Susanne Sommer, and that is the pattern photo that kind of made me think it might be fun to work with. But the dilemma here was that I don't knit myself a lot of garments that are all over stripes, and especially small stripes. And what I liked about this pattern was that I really liked the black and white effect of it. As I'd mentioned, I'd seen it on another podcast, and it was done in black and white, and I thought it was really beautiful. What I really wanted to do was blue and white. I thought a blue and white striped in this really rich blue would be gorgeous, but I didn't have enough yardage, and I knew that. I had enough for the white as the secondary stripe throughout, but for the main striping color, which is basically, you've got a little bit of extra, like you have some pickup details on the collar, the sleeves, and then obviously a generous hem with that, so you need just a little bit more yardage in that secondary color. And I already had less in all of these colors than I did of the white. So I knew I would have to do some sort of combination of striping, and so I knew I needed to do some swatching to figure out what I liked. And it worked out because I ended up having to swatch for this pattern 3 times to get gauge. I don't know why. I don't know if it's because I'm using a slightly thicker yarn, although that doesn't make sense when I explain the gauge issues. So she recommends, what does she recommend? A US 2.5 or 3 millimeter needle. I had to go all the way up to a US 5 or a 3.75 millimeter needle to even get close to gauge. Now I will say, I think once this blocks out, it'll actually block out slightly wider, slightly, than the finished dimensions. It's measuring out perfectly right now, and I know that the weight of this, I've worked with this yarn before. I know how it, I know the characteristics of what it does once you block it and how much it stretches. Like you can kind of block it to your desired measurements very easily. So I purposely decided to do the smallest size in this, knowing that I'd have a little extra room. It already is it's a pretty wide, what am I trying to say? Words are hard. It's meant to have a generous amount of ease. I think it's like 7 to 10 inches maybe, something like that. And I wanted a little bit of ease, but not a ton, so I just decided to go down to the smallest size. But anyway, while I was doing these gauge swatches, I was also trying out different yarn combinations, different color combinations. And the ones that I thought I would like, I actually didn't. Like at first, I was trying these 3 because this was actually a front runner for me as a secondary option. I didn't end up loving that because when it was the pink in between the white, the contrast wasn't as strong as between the blue and the white. And it was creating this pattern that, I don't know, this is gonna sound really weird, but it reminded me of, this is gonna age me too. It reminded me of those polo shirts I used to wear in college that were like, you know, you had whatever little animal here, and then it was just like pink with a blue stripe and white, or white with a pink stripe and blue, and it just had like the thicker and the thinner stripes. I just kept seeing those polos when I was looking at that motif, and it's not what I wanted for this, and maybe it's only because I could see that in my mind. Like I'm pretty sure I had a t-shirt with that same striping pattern, or not t-shirt, but polo shirt. So I didn't want to do that one. And so then I tried striping these 3 to where I would alternate the blue and the green, and that was okay, but it seemed like a color combination that I could see Thomas, my husband, wearing, and it wasn't something I wanted to see on me. I think it's just all the really dark colors. I don't know, it wasn't speaking to me. So then I tried doing like 3 rows of blue and then a different color, and then 3 rows of blue, and then alternating those colors. Didn't really like that either. And so my last option was like, let me just try doing all of the colors, and I'll just do like a rainbow effect. This is the original design that I made with this yarn. It's mostly white, but it does have those stripes in sort of a rainbow effect, and I really loved the way it looked. So I was like, let me just do that on this. And that swatch actually wasn't too bad. And that's when I was like, okay, what if I just go with it? Super hesitant because I still, 1, I don't wear a lot of really small striped garments like that, and 2, especially not with like all the colors. So we're just going for it, right? And my friend was very encouraging. She was like, honestly, you're busting your stash, and even if this isn't something that you love, this is probably a shirt that you will wear a lot. It'll be a comfy shirt, even if you're wearing it at home when you're doing work, like, you know, just go for it. And I kind of appreciated her saying that, because sometimes I think I put so much pressure on what I'm doing. And then especially, I will say, especially now that I've got a podcast where I'm sharing with you, sometimes I feel this need to like make sure I have something good to show, because if I'm ripping back constantly, or if it looks ugly, then I don't know, it's just like extra pressure, which she kind of helped remind me, like, there's no pressure. Even if I come here every week and I'm like, hey, I started this and I didn't like it, and so I'm restarting it, like, that's fine, right? That's like half of what the knitting process is. So getting out of my head, I just went for it. You start this construction actually in the back. So well, I can show you my swatch, it's not a swatch, it's what I have so far. You start here, you do this, a cast on here, and then you increase every single row at different points. And you have an increase, it's sort of like a raglan increase. And then you also do some other increases occasionally, but not every row. And so this grows pretty quickly. And then the increases that kind of act like a raglan give you this nice shape, which is what you see down the side of the shoulder. That kind of like chevron effect. So I started working on it. I built out most of the back shoulder shaping, and I was about to move on to the next step. And I took a step back and looked at it and all I could see was Rainbow Bright. I looked at it and I was like, I don't know. I don't know about this. I don't know. And I showed it to my friend and she was like, I don't know, it's not so bad. And I took a picture of it next to me and it's like, I don't know. And she was like, well, it doesn't help that you're frowning, but maybe you're frowning because you don't like it. And I started thinking about what I didn't like, and it turned out that I think it was the yellow. The yellow was really bothering me. Like, I don't mind the series of colors that I'm using, but for some reason it was that yellow that took it to a place of like Lifesavers wrapper or Rainbow Bright. That was just kind of like a no for me. So I took a picture and I took it into Photoshop and I just started playing around with different stripe options. I just tried to play with different color options. I don't know, for me, like at first I tried to just, take some markers out and like draw little lines of color and see, but that doesn't work in the same way that it does when I can actually see the garment. So I am fortunate that I have a designer's background as a graphic designer, and so I've got all of these programs at my disposal. And so I just spent a little bit of time in Photoshop, and that's when I realized that taking out the yellow really kind of solved my problems. As soon as I saw the color combinations without the yellow, I suddenly didn't feel this weird feeling anymore about it. And so then I was like, do I want to just remove the yellow and then have that same order? Or do I want to actually like replace the yellow with something else? Because my first initial Photoshop was literally just removing the yellow and changing it out with blue. And I ended up really liking the way that looked. And when I played with a few more options, that's the one I ended up going with. So what you'll see here is it technically has more blue stripes than anything else, which I don't mind because, like I said, I really wanted this to be mostly blue and white. So it won't be mostly blue and white, but blue will be the second most dominant color here. And so you'll get a little bit of, it won't be fully in order, and I also kind of like that too. It'll be a little bit more random with how it's striped. I mean, I say random, but because I'm such a perfectionist, nothing is random. I have my order here, so I know exactly how to change it out. But I think I'm happy with this. I'm very curious to see how this is gonna look overall. It's like I said, it's not something I typically do, but I'm kind of excited by that because it looks very different from anything I've knit so far. I will say when I was looking through the project pages, there was one I saw of this top. Somebody had done it where she just used sock yarn, and I don't remember if she used white or a solid color of some other, I don't remember exactly, and I'm not going to show it just because, I don't know if she wants to be on a podcast, but if you go to the project pages, you'll scroll and you'll see what I'm talking about. For her secondary color, she used a very variegated yarn, and the way that it pools, it's like kind of a neon yarn too. And so her main stripe is just a solid stripe, and then the secondary stripe is this like neon variegated, and it does this like really cool pooling effect, and it is beautiful. Like, it is so pretty, and I haven't been able to get that out of my head. So what I'm thinking actually is that this guy will be a great test for me to see if I like the garment, and if I like how it fits me, how it sits on me, and all of that. And if it does, then I might do a second version where I do something similar. I actually have, I have a sock yarn in my stash that I have no idea how it's going to knit up, like, at all. And I'm really curious if something like this would be a really cool way to let that show, because I think it might be a little bit crazy looking. Like, it's one of those yarns where it's beautiful skeined up, but it might look like absolute chaos when you're knitting it in stockinette. And I just think that garter stitch in general lends itself well to those sort of things too. I feel like you can get away with a little bit more just because you've got this interesting texture on the stitches as well. So once I figured out those colors, I did have to rip back to here. I mean, I basically just about started over. So I had to rip back to here and then restart it, but it moves very quickly. For now, you're knitting it flat, which means that you are knitting every row, and that does help. Like I said, this is the back shoulder shaping right now. And I've got a couple more rows before I move on to the next section, and I think at that time I put some of these, I think I put like the stitches here, from here to here, and the stitches from here to here on waste yarn maybe, and continue working the back. I think that's what I do next. So yeah, super interested to see how this one shapes up, and I'm really hoping I'm gonna like it. But we'll see. It's fun either way, and it's fun to have some sort of documentation of my process. So you will see. I will say if you have worked with heavily striped knits before, you'll know my pain with the yarn management situation. So I've got all the balls of yarn in my yarn bag, and I'm trying to keep them as organized as I can, but I'm also, because I don't want 1,000,001 ends to weave in, I'm carrying the yarn up the back. The edges are, you slip the edge and then you pick these up and do edging on it anyway, so you're never gonna see that. But it really helps to just carry the yarn up the back, so then you don't have to deal with weaving in so many ends. So we'll see. It's kind of interesting. Like, I feel like I'm sort of going into this one blind. Like, I read ahead and looked through the pattern, but also sometimes I kind of like to be surprised to see where it ends up, especially when it's not something that I'm designing. I kind of like to be able to turn my brain off and just go in autopilot and see where it takes me, because it's really enjoyable when it works out. Okay, I am back. Apologies for the cutting before that. We had somebody come to the door, and I feel like today's just been one of those days where there's been a lot of interruptions. So I'm hoping that this video isn't too choppy, but there's probably a couple of sections that I had to cut out just because we've had a couple of people come to the door while I was trying to shoot this. So I guess today is a popular day here. But that finishes up what I was chatting about with my knitting chat. And there's a few things that kind of tie in with my last pattern that I wanted to chat about at the end of this video. When I was talking last week about wanting to make the Everyday Attitude top, I mentioned that I had seen it on A Friend to Knit With by Leslie Friend on YouTube. And so I got a comment, and somebody asked me for my what podcasts I like to watch and if I had any recommendations. And I thought that was a great question, and one that, you know, it's something I want to share because there are so many amazing podcasts on here. I mean, watching these podcasts is what made me want to do this, just because I wanted to feel like I was part of this community, and felt like, you know, a lot of these people that I watch, even though I don't know them, they kind of feel like friends in a way. And that's what I love about this community. So I thought it would be fun to, you know, chat about who I watch. And originally my intention was that I was going to write up my list and I was going to just tell you today everybody I watch. And then I started writing, and I kept writing, and I didn't realize just how many amazing podcasts I follow. So I thought that my end segment for a while now, or maybe just like forever, will be, I'll add on some of my favorite podcasters to watch as well. That way I can go through all of them. Otherwise, if I tried to go through all of them now, that would be a whole other episode. And so I'll just leave you with a couple. I just saw Bagel jumping off of the bookshelf. So anyway, so I figured I would chat about just a few of them today, and then I will just continue to talk about my favorite as we work through these episodes. So obviously first I'll go ahead and chat a little bit about A Friend to Knit With, just because that was the one that I mentioned before. What I love about that video is I just think that Leslie has like a really good style. I don't know, when I see her style outfits, I just always think like it seems so effortless and chic, and it's always kind of, I always want that vibe, and I don't know if that's really the vibe I achieve, but I aspire to achieve that vibe. I don't know, she just always looks really put together, and I just really love the way she styles her knits and her outfits. She's not afraid to be bold, but she also has some really good ideas for like, I don't know, just how to make things look good together that you wouldn't expect. And the other fun thing I like about her podcast is that she lives in Pittsburgh. So I have a ton of family in Pittsburgh, and actually Thomas and I got married in Pittsburgh. So Pittsburgh is kind of a special place for us. It's got a special place in our hearts. So anytime, I don't know, I can see a little snippet of life in Pittsburgh, it just makes me feel a little bit closer to them, which I love. So yeah, if you haven't checked out her videos, I would definitely recommend it. Go see her. Okay, so my next recommendation, this is really funny because I swear to you, I was already planning to chat about this. This was going to be the next one I talked about. And then completely randomly, like just a couple of days ago, she ended up commenting on one of my videos, and she had some really nice things to say, and we ended up chatting a little bit on Instagram. And I had kind of a bit of a fangirl moment, but the Knitty Stew, which is Leanne Wilkins, I have been watching her videos for, I mean, since the beginning. Like, I love watching podcasts, so I'm always checking out what's new, and I love her videos because, so if you're not familiar with the Knitty Stew, she is a Canadian flight attendant, and typically she'll kind of take you on her trip, and she'll go to different towns or cities in Canada, and she'll talk a little bit about the history of the city and what is going on there now, how it's developed, what the city life is like, if there is any. She'll kind of take you with her as she goes and explores the town. And then if she goes to any yarn stores, then you can kind of join her and get a little bit of a tour. And I just love that. It's been really cool to see all of these towns I've either heard of or were new to me, places that I've wanted to go that I get to see, you know, places that I've seen her go to that make me now want to go. And so it's just always really fun, like on top of just all the beautiful knitwear she creates, that you kind of get to go on this journey with her. So definitely check that one out. I highly recommend that one. She's really great. And she's also a fellow cat fan, so, you know, bonus points there. And then I'm just gonna probably talk about like two more, and I'll save the rest for next time. There's so many, but I've mentioned this one a bunch of times, so I figured I would mention it now, is Andrea Mowry's I'll Knit If I Want To. If you are unfamiliar with Andrea Mowry, she is a very big knitwear designer. She's been in the game for years and years, and she comes up with really cool designs. And she's one of those people where when you watch the video, she feels more down to earth than you were expecting. I don't know, I guess like you see these photos of her and you expect this very like cool girl that's like, oh, she's far too cool to be somebody I would ever chat with. But then you watch her videos and she just seems very wholesome, and she's just a delight to watch. And what I like about her format is that, you know, she'll share new designs that she's got that are out. She'll share old designs that she's made a long time ago that she's wearing. It's kind of a reminder of like past things she's worked on years ago. But then she also does a Q&A, which I love. So, you know, people will send her questions and she will just pick 4 or 5 questions and go really in depth about answering them and the process behind it. And it can be about anything. Like, she's answered things about her design process, things about knitting techniques, spinning. She does cover a lot of spinning now, and she'll show her yarn that she's spinning herself. And it's a great like learning lesson each week. Like she's just a wealth of knowledge. And I mean, she's been doing this for so long that I really enjoy listening to the questions that people ask her and her really thoughtful answers, on top of just, you know, getting to listen to her. She seemed very sweet and friendly. She's delightful. So definitely check out that one. And then I will just do one more. Also, if you can see Bagel right now. So I don't know how, but Bagel has just found a Christmas ornament. I think it must have been tucked away under the couch, and it's probably a Christmas ornament that he stole from the tree last Christmas. And he's currently just batting it around the living room like a little soccer ball. But anyway, the last podcast I'll recommend for this week is Sommer Lee, and I believe it's called OK Knit. And I think it's called OK Knit because she is from Tulsa, Oklahoma. And what I like about hers is her videos are very like a day in the life of sort of thing. Like she'll answer some questions, but largely she kind of gives herself these little like sock challenges. So if you don't know Sommer Lee, she's mostly a sock knitter, and she's done all sorts of different sock knits. And she just had a book that came out that's fabulous, and you should definitely pick it up because it's a really great book. And she explores colors in a fun way, in ways that you wouldn't always expect. But I just really like to kind of watch her. She'll just sit there on the couch and knit and chat about what she's trying to accomplish. She always has these lofty goals that she doesn't always meet, and like owns up to that. And that's kind of part of the fun. Is like it's nice to kind of watch somebody go through that entire creative process, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And I just really like how honest that entire experience is, and I think those are really fun. She was posting weekly for a while, but I think she's starting to kind of spread them out a little bit, but I think she typically posts semi-weekly. So yeah, just so you know, I have an absolute ton of names written down. Like there are so many, so like don't think this is in any sort of order. So I'll continue to chat about my favorites over the next few weeks, or maybe it will just be continuing, but definitely check those all out. Like they're so good. And every time I see those pop up on my menu, I go straight to watching them. And that concludes my recommended podcast section of my podcast. And I will just leave it with chatting about my reading updates. So I finished Wrong Place, Wrong Time by Gillian McAllister, and I loved it. I think that is one of the better books I've read in a long time. I enjoyed that book so much. There were so many moments where I love it when you can't predict what's going to happen, because I always kind of go in thinking I know what's going to happen, and things just kept switching in a way to where I was just shocked. Like every few pages, I'd be like, oh my God. And then I'd be shocked again. So it's just really interesting. Again, as I've said before, not gonna give much away. I will just say that the main character is caught in a time loop and working through her life to figure out a way to get out of the time loop and figure out what event caused that time loop and how to stop it or change it. Super interesting, especially if you're into like Groundhog Day or those sorts of things where you've got that kind of story where you're going back and you're reliving the same day over and over again, only with a fun twist that I was not expecting. So I definitely recommend that book. It's a really great book. And I feel like I'm still kind of on a high from reading that. I just started another book, which I'm not feeling as excited about, and I don't know if it's just because I'm coming off of reading a book that I really enjoyed and this is just so different. I'm not sure, but this was one of those. So I use Libby, which is just the library app, and I'll wait for, I'll put books on hold and kind of forget about them just based on like if something is recommended, then I'll just put it on hold. And then otherwise, I will just grab a book, and most of the times I won't even read the synopsis because I don't want to get spoiled. And So this was one of those books where I had seen that it was really highly recommended and I'd put it on my wait list and I had completely forgotten about it. And it popped up about halfway through me reading Wrong Place, Wrong Time, so I just figured I would read this next. It's called The Idea of You by Robin Lee, and you might recognize this. I believe there's either a movie or a show based on it with Anne Hathaway, and I know that caused a little bit of a stir. Without giving too much away, and obviously I haven't actually read that much, but the gist is that the main character is this woman. She is a mom approaching 40, and she takes her daughter to meet her daughter's favorite boy band. In the process, her and a member of the boy band get entangled, shall we say. I mean the almost 40-year-old character and the 20-year-old boy band guy. So it's I guess the story of them, and you know, yeah, I don't know. I don't think there's going to be anything big happening. I think that's probably the gist of it, is just the struggle of how they deal with the relationship, what the relationship is, and recognizing the age difference. So yeah, I mean, it's not a bad book by any sense. Like, it's written well. It's just, I think after what I finished reading, I don't know if I'm quite in the mood for a book like this, but I'm gonna give it a shot because I know if I send it back, then I won't be able to read it again for like months. So yeah, that's what I'm reading now. If you guys have any other book recommendations, like especially if you read Wrong Place, Wrong Time and you really enjoyed it and you have other books that you thought had that same vibe, definitely let me know. Other than that, I think that kind of concludes everything I have to talk about today. So if you stayed till the end, thank you so much. I very much appreciate it. Thank you for sticking around and being a part of this community with me. I love all your comments and I love to chat with you guys. So this is really, really great. And I look forward to being able to do this every week. So yeah, if you want to get in touch with me, you can find me at MishiFraz on Instagram and Ravelry. You can email me at mishifraz@gmail.com, and then you can also find my blog, which is mishifrazknits.com. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.